Hello everybody and welcome. This is a Legacy School Comprehension lesson for Year 6, Week 2. For this lesson, you'll need your comprehension booklet and a pencil and eraser, or a pen if you're writing in pen. Alright, so we'll start off by reading the text. It's on page 5, text 2, called The Appalling Day. You can read out of your booklets because I know it's not exactly obvious on the screen. I'll read for you, and we'll discuss some of the difficult words or the new words, and then we'll answer the questions. The appalling day. Daphne Entlewertle was having an appalling day. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being low, she already rated her day at -6, and it was spiraling downwards even further. The day had started badly. Her alarm clock had failed to go off, and she had not woken until 11:20. She had rushed into work and arrived hours late, just as the rest of her colleagues were preparing to go to lunch. Now she slid furtively behind her desk and started shuffling piles of paper around. She would have asked a friend to buy her a sandwich to eat at her desk, but in her haste to leave the house, she had left her purse and house keys in the kitchen. She forgot her ID card as well, but the security guard allowed her in as he knew her very well. She made herself a scalding hot coffee in the office kitchen. Here we have the word scalding underlined. Since they use hot coffee afterwards, I think it would be easy to imagine what this word means. If only she could avoid her boss, Mrs. Fothergill. Mrs. Fothergill was not someone you chose to spend time with. Fortunately, she mostly ignored her employees. But when she did notice them, she made their lives a misery by criticizing their abilities and ideas. We have the word misery underlined. Her packaging company, Big Ideas, was currently in direct competition with a new packaging design company called Create. Create had already poached a number of Mrs. Fothergill's clients, which had driven her mad with rage. To poach someone or to poach something is to try to attract them and gain them or to take them from your competition. The boardroom had echoed with the sounds of her wrath, and the meeting had ended with the sacking of the creative director. As we have said, Daphne had an appalling day, and early that afternoon a summons came from Mrs. Fothergill. Would Daphne come to see her? Daphne walked into the Spartan office on the 3rd floor with terror in her heart. Mrs. Fothergill's face was thunderous. Her florid cheeks were livid with rage, and her eyes practically bulged out of her head. She threw a green tissue box at Daphne that walloped her on her forehead, causing her to yelp in pain. Ouch! "And what in the name of all that's reasonable do you call that?" Mrs. Fothergill screamed furiously. Daphne winced. She picked up the box and stared at it blankly. There was a nasty, garish logo on the side, and on the top of the box was a picture of a man blowing his nose gustily. Daphne winced again. She could see why Mrs. Fothergill was fuming. The design was vile, utterly vile. Here, vile is underlined. Can you guess what vile means? "Well, get on with it," snapped the boss. "Explain yourself. You designed that monstrosity, and you expect your hideous creation to appeal to the general public?" "Well, no, of course not. But how dare you produce such a ghastly, unimaginative rubbish?" Daphne listened to Mrs. Fothergill's rant for a further 10 minutes, and was finally allowed to scuttle out of her office, her face aflame with shame and misery. Mrs. Fothergill had every reason to be disappointed with the packaging design for Sneezy's tissues. But she, Daphne, had not created it. It was unfair to blame Daphne for something she had never even seen before. She spent the next few hours trying to locate the designer of the box, who had conveniently gone out on a client interview. To make up for arriving late that morning, Daphne left work later than usual. The sky had darkened to a dull, steel gray, and ominous clouds scudded across it. Can you imagine what that sky looks like? I think it's pretty close to how the skylines look nowadays here in autumn in Sudan. The bus stop was swarming with other tired workers going home late. There was no room on the already crowded bus when it finally arrived. Daphne sighed heavily and began to walk home just as the rain began to fall. By the time she reached the top of her street, her feet were aching. Her coat was soaked and she was desperate for a cup of tea. It was then that she saw the lottery ticket lying in the gutter beside the drain. So a lottery ticket the lottery is a game or a contest where you buy these tickets, you scratch them off, and you have a combination of numbers. If you have the correct combination of numbers, then you can win a lot of money. And she found this lottery ticket lying in the gutter, which is a passageway for rainwater so that it doesn't flood the streets. Daphne stared at it and blinked. She squinted down into the gutter. Yes, it definitely was a lottery ticket, and it looked crisp and new, as if it had only recently been bought. Daphne straightened her aching back and looked around. There was nobody about, which meant that the owner of the ticket had already gone. Daphne reached down into the gutter and picked up the ticket before the rain washed it down the drain. She held it tightly in her hands. The ticket was dated Saturday, the 15th of October. Daphne found her heart wanting to leap out of her chest. She looked around herself. Perhaps it was sort of a hoax? A trick someone was playing? But she could see no one watching from behind a window and no lacy curtain twitching. So she stuffed the ticket in her pocket and continued her weary slog to her front door. Or rather, her neighbor's front door, to ask for the spare key. At last, Daphne was in her home, with a cup of tea in her hands, reflecting on the dreadfulness of the day. Suddenly, the phone rang, and the aggressive sound shattered the quiet. Bring, bring! It was her sister, Imelda, who was calling to remind her about the school feat Daphne had promised to attend at the weekend. The school feat could be like a school fair, or it could be like a play. It's an event at the school that her sister is taking part in. She confirmed to her sister that she would come, already dreading the long train ride to her sister's on the Friday night. She told her sister about her totally terrific and simply stupendous day. And when they hung up, she slumped down on her sofa to turn the television on. All right, so now that we read the text, I want you to look up the words that you don't understand in the dictionary, and we are going to answer a lot of these questions. So number 1, what starts the day off badly for Daphne? Make sure you answer in complete sentences, you watch your spelling, and of course your punctuation is on point. Number 2, what is the name of the company she works for? Number 3, describe what a company like Daphne's does. Number 4, name 2 items that she left at home in the rush. 5, who called her at the end of the day? 6, do you think she is happy to come and visit her sister? Explain your answer. This is a tricky question, so I want you to reread the last 2 paragraphs and think very, very carefully. 7, explain in detail why Mrs. Fothergill had a bad reputation. A reputation is what people think or say about you. In Arabic, we call it a sum'a. Okay, why do you think she has a bad reputation? 8, describe what a Spartan office might look like. 9, where did Daphne find the lottery ticket? 10, read the following sentences from a sentence from the text. Create had already poached a number of Mrs. Fothergill's clients. Using your own words, explain what the sentence means. So we already went over this and explained it, so I don't think you should have a problem with that. 11, find an example of alliteration in the last paragraph. If you remember from your figurative language lesson last year or the year before, alliteration is when a phrase or a sentence begins, the words in a phrase or a sentence begin with the same sound, like Peter Piper picked a pair of pickled peppers. Okay? I want you to find